Azure App Service. Okay, who's deployed a web app to Azure? That's all we're doing here, web apps. So this is fairly straightforward. Let me open a project here. Demo web. This is a .NET Core app, Core 2, simple Razor pages. Again, there isn't really anything very sophisticated about this application. Fairly standard web app. If I run this, I can run this on my local machine. I can also publish this to Azure, right, and have it hosted in Azure. So running locally, I have this connected to a simple SQL Server database. I'm running locally from Visual Studio. It's running local DB, or the local version of SQL Server. I've got home. Yeah, fun stuff is just around the corner. That's when Grant and Mark show up. But until then, you have to deal with it. And of course, for the first time in the last day and a half, I get an exception. But we're not gonna debug it now. Oh, I know why. Because I put a server-based fun little story. I put the Azure SQL. So I provisioned a SQL Server in Azure. To initialize it, I changed my local connection string so I could initialize the database, and I didn't change it back. When I did this, I was at home in my home office. Azure SQL has a nice little firewall around it, not allowing just any old IP to go talk to Azure SQL. The IP at home is not the same as the IP at the office. Okay, interesting little story. So. But of course, I mean, something was going to happen, right? So anyway, trust me, it works. We're going to keep moving. Hand wave. So what we'll do is bring up the deployed version. So this is that sophisticated app in Azure. And what I'm doing here is actually displaying messages. Some of these may or may not look familiar, as I actually have another logic app on the third topic, or the third, thank you, subscription. On the third subscription, which is reading the messages, triggering off of the message, and then inserting that message into SQL Server. Also, something else you probably don't really want to do in a production scenario is have your logic app writing to SQL Server, but hey, you can do it. So I did it. And so this web is displaying messages out of the database, which is written to by the logic app. Okay. Interesting things about applications. About this application, a couple of things. Logic app again. Sorry, going back a little bit. There's a nice web view of this. You get some default messages. You see something that doesn't succeed. I can quickly click into this and see what's wrong with it. There's also, I don't know if you remember that slide, second slide where I talked, there was $1 billion. That $1 billion is what Microsoft says they're spending annually on security. Annually on security. So you see that all over the place with visibly in the API is also invisibly, right? Where they have perimeter protection and, all the staff, every data center, just, you can imagine when you think about it, all the stuff that's going on. 54 regions. Well, each region is made up of at least 2 data centers, often more. All those have to be physically protected. Then you have all the network security that goes into it on top of the physical security. And then there's protection of these resources, right? Let's make sure that my fancy-dancy demo logic app doesn't get a DOS attack, right? So they've got that stuff built in, and that's a lot of the features and functions that we've been seeing in the last years. A lot of last few years, a lot of bulking up of the security perimeter. Okay, moving on to demo web. Also intelligence, where so again, security. Security, I don't know, a couple years ago, an app service was, down below the fold, as they say. Now it's right up there at the top, right? They want you thinking about security all the time. Here's, apparently I did a pretty good job deploying this web app because it's not complaining to me about security or giving me alerts, but it's looking for them, right? And if it detects something wrong with my configuration, it's going to tell me about it, right? So this is a pretty cool feature that really helps when you're developing. One less thing to worry about. I think that's probably about it. Any other questions on app service, what I did there? Again, I just built the app locally, published it to Azure.